We are coming to you live from Ithaca, New York, home of Cornell University. I am Chris Wofford, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining today's keynote. Now, it's safe to assume that very few, if any of us here today, have ever been awarded a key to the city, which is a ceremonial honor, as you may know, typically bestowed upon hometown heroes, towering public figures who have achieved something extraordinary in connection with that city. Today's Paul Ramirez Jonas has flipped the script on who gets a key to the city, democratizing it, making it accessible and enjoyable for everyone. No matter your background, your history, no questions asked. So I think you're going to love today's keynote because Paul Ramirez Jonas is here in studio at last.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Paul. It's so great to connect. First, a few notes to a few of our viewers before we get started here. As usual, yes, this event is live. It is also being recorded and will be viewable very shortly after at the same URL. So stick around. If you have to leave, you can watch the recording at the same URL. If you want to share it with colleagues or friends, share this page. Pass the word on. You may submit questions in the chat as well, which you may open by clicking the dialog box at the top right of your video player. I'll be getting some of the questions here on my iPad throughout, so anytime a question comes up, simply ask it. Throughout our discussion, we may share a few URLs and resources in the chat as well, so heads up for those. And if you are watching the archived recording, if this is not the live date, right, this is later in the future, you can check some of those links that are be available in the overview section just below. So, Paul Ramirez Jonas, tell us about the key to the city in Birmingham, England. This just happened a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, this I think it was a month ago that we wrapped it up, and we're just now tidying things and working on the documentation and paying the last bills.
Yeah, you bet. All right, well, you've put together some beautiful media. Why don't we tear into it?
All right, so what is key to the city, and what do I mean by a more inclusive public monument? So this is a key to the city of Boston. It just happens to be. I just pulled this image out. And, you know, keys to the city are symbolic. They have a long history from when cities in Europe were walled, and they literally had a door through the fortress wall into the city. And outside, people who were not citizens, right, citizens, were given the key to the city if they were deemed very trustworthy. And it was also called the freedom of the city, the key to the city. You can call it either way. So the project has two aims. One is like, well, what if this key that is a big symbolic thing became a key like the keys you have in your keychain that can open a closet, the store, a locker in an airport, and and what if we went throughout a city, in this case, the city of Birmingham, and we looked at sites that were spread all over the city, and all the sites together start to describe what is public space, what is the kind of public space that brings us together to make something we call cities. So to do this, we just started to hit different kinds of spaces and try to find partners who would be willing to collaborate and participate in this. For example, this is Selfridges, which is one of the biggest, I think it is the biggest department store in Birmingham, and it's a chain in England, and started to speak with them and the store managers and the PR people about like, how would they want to be included in this project. We worked a lot with Heritage Trust, which is an organization in the UK that keeps, the castles and all the heritage stuff in working order. And we started to talk about this bridge that actually sits right on the edge of the city. It's at the city limits. So if you go beyond this bridge, you're outside the city. On this side where the picture was taken, you're inside the city. We work with developers. These are developers of what is going to be the tallest building in Birmingham, and start to speak with them about, how would you want to work together? As you can imagine, there were a lot of no's. We also work with religious organizations. So we collaborated with one of the biggest mosques in Birmingham. It's already a mosque, like a church, is an open space that welcomes anyone 24/7. So it was really a conversation about like, how could you be more open? What would that mean? Interestingly, we also work with the stadium. And when word got around underground that we were trying to build this, the stadium actually came to us. They were like, hey, we want to be part of this project. And again, so this is just like to show you an example of the kinds of projects and spaces that we're trying to put together. And I want to emphasize this, is so that one key becomes a master key and actually can open and give you access to all of this. The other question that the project is trying to resolve is who gets this key, right? This is Mayor Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, giving the key to the Dalai Lama. And this is typical of what key to the city means, right? Only the mayor gets to decide who gets the key. And that person is usually a hero, someone in history, not the likes of you and I, regular people, just someone who has made it into history somehow. Because really the key to the city is a medal, right? It's a symbolic object that someone bestows on you for a reason. So just to show you, really drive the point home, this is a list of everyone who's gotten the freedom of the city of Birmingham between like the late 19th century and the late 20th century. That's it, that list. It's like 24 or 40 people max. And we wanted to turn that really upside down. So here what you see is actual footage of 15,000 keys being fabricated for this project. The keys were made by Yale. Birmingham is the cradle of the Industrial Revolution, and key manufacturing, among other things, was something that they used to do in the past and they still do. So Yale was very proud to be able to make the keys in Birmingham, of course now with robots, but still. Yeah. This is what the key looked like on my left side, on your right side of the screen. Or I'm dyslexic, so I don't know. The one that says Yale, and you see an arm with a hammer, that is a little detail of the coat of arms of the city of Birmingham. And the other side has an outstretched hand with a key on its palm and saying what this is, which is the freedom of the city. And the other side says Birmingham 2022. So 15,000 of these were made and to be given away. The place they were given away was in the New Street Station, which is the hub of transportation that links buses, subways, like it all comes to the center of town and gets redistributed. Millions of people go through this station. And in the middle of it, we put this booth with a place where people could come and bestow the key to the city on whomever they wanted for whatever reason they wanted.
Got a lot of nice real estate. That's a big setup you got there.
I know. I was really impressed that they gave us this much space.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a lot of limitations when you make public art. Like I wanted that to be a rug in the middle, but because of like all sorts of rules, it had to be like a giant red sticker.
I like it.
Also, after people got the key, there was also very highly detailed maps of the city, and everyone got a sticker, and you could put a sticker in the map on your house or where you live, basically. And on the first day, we had a media event where the mayor, Lord Mayor of Birmingham, Maureen Cornish, came, and she gave me the key, and I gave her the key. But I want to emphasize that this is that day for 1 hour was the only time where we had kind of made up events of important people giving keys to each other. And we had to do that so we could get the press, as you can see in this shot, so that it could hit the press, word could get out, and then people would know to come here and do this. So it was really a very deliberate attempt at making a media, something the media would cover. And also to make sure that people understood that this is a semi-official thing. This really is the key to the city. In fact, all the records of all the key transfers were deposited at the end of the project in City Hall, along with that very short list of people. So now you see that very short list of people who got key to the city, plus 15,000 pieces of paper recording who else got the key to the city through this project. We also had a local hero basketball star give the key to the city to the mini mayor. The mini mayor is a lovely tradition in Birmingham where they actually elect a child to be parallel mayor to the city and has some official functions. But after this, it was just everyday people like you and I coming to give the key to someone else for whatever reason they wanted. And if people misunderstood the project and they came by themselves to get the key, then volunteers would match them to other people who misunderstood the project. And they would say, well, you can't get the key, you can give it away. You two came here to get it. Why don't you take 10 minutes to get to know each other, figure out why you deserve it, and then you give it to each other. When it got really busy, we did several ceremonies at once. Here you see 5 people over the plinth. And what they're doing is they're filling out a form, because it's an official thing, saying who they are, the date, who they're giving the key to, and for what reason, signing their names, and these are the ledgers that then went to City Hall to be recorded. Here you can sort of peek at what one person said. It's like, I think it says, to Uncle so-and-so for being a great uncle. So really, you are in control of why you give the key to someone else. And then you have to say it out loud, because it's a ceremony. So after you finish with your filling out the ledger, you have to say it out loud. I give you the key to the city by the power bestowed in me, and then you hand it over to the other person. For example, here's the head of Yale, the key manufacturer, giving the key to their oldest serving employee, longest serving employee. And the key came in a little presentation box, and with it had a little kind of passport. The passport had all the legal stuff that you need to have, credits, but also a guide to how to reach 21 sites around Birmingham with bus directions and public transportation and maps. And it didn't tell you exactly what you would find. It would just tell you how to get to where the lock is. And the rest you had to go by yourself to figure out. And it's an incredible level of participation. I think with this and other projects that I've made, to me, the most satisfying thing is how diverse the public is. Cultural institutions are still having to get these outreach projects and programs to try to get people into the cultural institution. But this type of project goes to where people are and delivers something that is legible and meaningful at the same time. Just regular folks. Even a teddy bear got the key to the city.
I think you mentioned the press coverage, but you had also mentioned in our previous meetings the social media potential for
Yes.
this, and how it was realized, and how it's just kind of a natural fit, right? It really took off and did pretty well, I imagine.
Yeah, when the first time I did, I've done several key projects, but Key to the City, which is the most ambitious, has only been realized once before, 12 years ago in New York City. Instagram did not exist.
Sure,
There was
right.
Facebook and Flickr, and then we already got a glimpse, but this time we knew.
Yeah.
Right, because the selfie has become ubiquitous. And I'll show
Yes.
people some later today, some samples of what people, because it's very elaborate. Now you go into TikTok and people are putting soundtracks and editing, and
Yeah.
it's better than this presentation.
Yeah. A whole ecosystem was built out of your control.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And I have to emphasize that all I'm doing is creating the keys and negotiating with different sites, but the sites themselves decide what is going to be open. So the station manager was really, of New Street Station, was really keen on welcoming us and having the site of distribution being there, but then they wanted to also be a site that the key would open. And they had a discussion, and they took us to the end of platform 1 where the trains leave, and then there's a door. We've all seen doors like this in public space. Mystery doors, they're not for you. But with the key to the city, you can open it, and you can go down, down, down to the very bottom, under the tracks, deep underground, and you see these amazing tunnels that connect the train station to other parts of the city. But of course, this is a little bit of a fantasy because it's a very secure site, as you can
I was just
imagine.
going to ask, is that an escort?
Yeah, so this is what the beauty of the project is, how sites really get involved. So the station managers were like, we really want to show this, it's really cool. But then when they thought it through, it's like, we can't let people kind of roam by themselves. So they completely committed that railroad workers would, like on a rotating basis, would be on the site, and when you open the door, they would escort you and guide you also so you wouldn't get lost through the place. And then impromptu things happen where each railroad worker started to invent a tour, you know, where like their favorite places, what they like pointing out like, oh, this tunnel goes all the way to the post office, et cetera, et cetera. One of the sites that was really interesting was this building that was being built, because Birmingham is flat and it doesn't have a point of view where you can see the city. And they had built an observation deck, but it was going to be rented by a tenant. It was not going to be open to the public. So they said, well, before the tenant moves in and before we finish the building, what about if people come up? So you actually had to go through this construction site and then through a ramp, and then you got this amazing view of the city.
It really is pan flat.
Yeah.
With that. Yeah.
And that is something that you can only experience through here.
That's beautiful.
And you don't know when you do this exactly what sites are going to be a success, but this became so popular that when the project was about to end on the last weekend, from Friday to Sunday to the last day, 5,000 people came to this observation deck. And that is just completely a level of participation that was completely beyond expectation. And I have to say, there's this infrastructure happening here. All these pictures make it seem really magical, but again, you know, the building committed some of their staff people to look after this. And then there were people who volunteered to the project, who were present at all times, you know, to help out if people got lost for security reasons. So it's magical, but there's also an infrastructure underneath that's making it happen that involves hundreds of people. Same as in the station. The station was staffed by 5 volunteers at any one moment that just like on a rotating basis kept it going for 6 weeks. I can talk to you about Selfridges.
I love this example.
Yeah, this example is interesting because Selfridges was in from day one. But it's a store. It's already open.
Right.
In like many public spaces, it's like, well, open, but open only from, 9 to 6.
Sure.
So they were like, well, how do we make this more open? And everything we tried kept falling through. We're like, well, we have a roof. That didn't work out. They're like, well, we have the employee cafeteria. That didn't work out. And finally, they came up with this, which is they constructed this entire booth. And again, I didn't make this booth.
They fit okay.
Yeah, this is not my idea. My idea is just like, how do you connect to this larger project? So with the key, a participant can open the booth, and there's like a little, iPad console, and it lets you play the music that's been piped through the speakers of the entire department store. So you just go and you choose what song you want to play, and then it's playing in the store.
How did that go over?
It was great.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I really wanted a key to a vitrine so you could be with the products that are being shown, but that couldn't work out for very complicated reasons.
Sure.
This was also a site that I wanted to do 12 years ago in New York City, and it fell through at the last minute. But working with the Robin Hood Cemetery, they were also really, really enthusiastic. And they gave us a tomb that's waiting, to be purchased by someone to put someone's ashes. And we made a custom door, and we put a lock so you can look inside. This is a kind of public space that is really interesting to me. We live our lives in private, at work, in home, then we go to the street and we're in public. But then when we pass, we choose to be buried in public, which I think is really interesting. It's like then our mortal lives are mostly private, and then the rest, we're on display for everyone to see. There's another level of participation that this shows too, is that people who come and visit the tomb then start to use it. This is something we have no control over, and you hope it will happen, but you don't know exactly how it's going to happen. So people start to leave memorials for recently deceased family members, poetry.
It's really sweet.
So then there's like this other layer of content for participants that's generated by the participants. And when I say a more inclusive monument, this is what I mean, is how can we make public monuments that provoke this kind of engagement and involvement on the part of the people who are experiencing the monument.
It also elicits like kind of an emotional response.
Yeah.
A real empathetic kind of thing. I think this is very sweet.
It's very hard. I often think about the Maya Lin Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the most successful memorials this country has produced for the Vietnam War. And it is very moving, but I'm like, but eventually we'll get to the point where the last living relative of someone who died in Vietnam will also die. And then what will happen to the collective memory of that war? And will that monument age well after that point? The same way that I look at a World War I memorial and have no emotional connection to it. So maybe it's impossible. I showed you this bridge earlier.
Yeah.
And I just want to show you, I just followed this gentleman because I wanted to see what is it like for someone to
Are we in a public space right now?
Yeah, you approach the
there we
bridge.
are.
The
Okay.
directions make you park on this by this pub.
Okay.
And then like on the back of the parking lot, there's a little path that
So-
leads to these canals.
Yeah, so
and
he's
he's
got his
trying
little
to
guide
find
here.
it. Yeah.
Not Google mapping this at all. He's going by your book.
Yeah, I really believe in slowing things down. So
Yep.
a lot of my projects, things get really analog.
This looks like a canal then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's interesting also about many of these sites is that the experience sometimes is no big shakes. The really interesting thing is that you go to a part of your own city that you would have never gone to.
Yeah.
A different neighborhood, something on the edge. Here, the little door on the side of the bridge just has these pieces of wood that are stored there for if there's an emergency collapse of the canal. Then apparently, like, you take out this wood and you shore it up, and every one of these bridges, when it was built, had this little section. In a way, when I say it, it sounds not that interesting, but just finding your way to the edge of the city, following the instructions, going through the little path, and then you find this bridge, and then you discover that it has a door. And again, once you open it and you see this, people are motivated to do things like this.
That's really sweet.
Right.
Yeah.
So the project just keeps evolving. This is, for me, actually a really interesting site. This is a private garden. This is also something I tried before, and I could never get anyone brave enough to do it. The Blydens, who are a couple in a neighborhood, decided to basically open their garden to everyone. And I was visiting the neighborhood, and I met the man, Mr. Blyden, and he was really concerned with his neighborhood. And he was like, I want to do this because I want to set an example of how to be a better neighbor. And we kept trying to explain to him, potentially hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people are going to come here. He's like, I totally understand this. I understand what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, let's go. So we did a few adjustments. Like we painted the door a bright color so
Yep.
it would be easier to find. It's not easy to find, by the way. And then you go in, and he really went all out because frankly, the garden was a little bit in shambles when I saw it. And once he committed, he like built these benches, he cleaned it up.
Oh, cool.
He made a little planting. And then completely on his own, he set up this little question of the week board where like he would write a question and then visitors would answer the question. And I spoke with him recently and I asked him how the experience was. And it was interesting. He said like how people would leave presents for him and his wife. Also, he said how in the past, if there would be like teenagers hanging out, it would always be perceived as threatening, like why are they here? But then at one point there were like teenagers in his garden having like a little get together, but then it was fine.
Yeah.
Because it's their garden
Yeah.
too.
Change the terms of engagement. That's great.
Yeah. And this I want to show you. I'm just trying to show you some examples. This is the stadium. So it's a side door, right? This is what it looks like when you approach. You're just like on the side of this giant structure. There's these doors. You open it with your key and boom, you're right there. You're in the bleachers. And you're in this empty stadium waiting for a game. It's off season.
So this probably was similarly staffed, right? You can't just walk out onto the pitch and do what you want.
This one was unstaffed.
Unstaffed.
It's interesting. All these public space is a lot about fear, right? So you're trying to do this, well, I'm trying to do this project, and you're trying to fight the fear of the stranger, right? It's like, it's a public space. Thousands of people come here. No one's watching the thousands of people, but then it closes down. Then when it's closed down, suddenly the public becomes scary, right?
Yeah.
But not always. It's really on a case-by-case basis. Like in this stadium, they're like, no, who cares? Like, what could they possibly do? You know, it's like thousands of people go through here. Fine, we'll give the key.
Wow.
But it's surprising. It's surprising how sometimes a site would say yes, and then they would think it through. And if they called their lawyers, they were out. Because then suddenly there would be like fear of liability for spaces that are normally even open all the time. So it's always puzzling.
Yeah, I want to poll our audience
Yeah.
really quickly. You and I had talked about asking this earlier. Would you open your garden to the public? What would you be capable of sharing with the public if you were to do so? Again, not necessarily your garden, but your property, making your private property public. I think probably people will consider themselves a little more generous than maybe they really are in this particular poll. But Nicholas, I'm looking for some anecdotal information. So if you can, tell me what the audience lets us know about. I would be curious. So again, would you open your garden to the public, viewers? And again, another reminder too, if you have any questions for Paul Ramirez Jonas, we've got a good solid 35 left. So give me some questions. Okay, Paul, take it away.
Great.
Where were we? We're out on the pitch.
We're out on the pitch, and this is a good example of what you were referring to about social media.
Yeah.
I'm showing you these photographs that I took and some other photographers took, but really what's happening is people do this and they take their selfie. But then if you're following this young lady, what you see is that she didn't just go to the stadium. She also went to the Blyden's Garden, and she also went to Aston Hall, which is a old kind of aristocratic home that is now a museum. So then there's this other public, right, of the followers of the 15,000 people who are participating in the project. So it's just kind of rippling and rippling and rippling out.
The key to the city Brum is the Twitter hashtag for this. So I encourage you all to check it out. I think we have put it on our resources here. Yes. So we're going to share that Twitter URL, and you can see all the tweets associated with the project.
Yeah, in fact, I just have this, which I just scrolled on my phone through that hashtag on
Oh, there you go.
on Instagram.
Yeah.
Right? And you can just see how, for me as an artist, what's interesting is like, why am I even taking pictures of my project? The project is being fully documented in a way that really shows what the project is, which is the experience of people doing it, right? And what it means to them. Each one of those images has a small comment or comments from friends. And so you can learn more about what this actually meant for people. As an artist, this is a really rare opportunity. Usually you make an artwork, you show it, and you have no idea what people really think. Of course, your friends tell you it's wonderful, but they're lying. You want to know what people are really think. So I get little glimpses into what it means for people.
Looks like all ages, which is really exciting and encouraging about this.
Yeah.
There must have been a lot of school involvement. Or no, I don't know.
No, it seemed to be sort of parents and children and grown-ups, and it really,
Okay.
the demographics were all over the place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I want to show you some examples of the deep involvement, because the project is in some ways very benign, but sometimes very meaningful as well. The Green Lane Mosque was really keen on participating because they wanted to this is their community outreach organizer. And he really says, even though Islam is one of the largest religions in Birmingham, there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what Islam is. So they went all out. There's a side entrance to the mosque, and they constructed this we constructed the box. Mm-hmm. So it's a box with a lock. And when you open it, what they put in there are pre-programmed fobs. So fobs are like electronic keys,
Yep.
which let you open that door during the 5 times for prayer. And if you open the door, then it'll be like a self-guided set of instructions, right? You actually have to take off your shoes because it's a mosque, so you will not walk with your shoes on. And it led you to a chamber where they actually produced a video that plays simultaneously with the prayers, offering a translation of what the imam is saying and explaining the different steps of how a prayer is conducted in a mosque. And then they would open these doors. So you would like sit in a chair, watch the prayers, and have this flat screen explain it to you. And I was like, it's like a whole art project all by itself.
They really went into it. Hey, I have a quick question from
Sure.
Anne-Marie, who checks in and wanted to know about the timeline. This isn't a permanent thing, right? What was the duration of the project?
It lasted the whole summer. So
Oh.
we gave keys away for almost an entire 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then it was open an additional 4 weeks to give time to people who got the key at the very end to be able to see sites. So it was
Yeah.
a total run of 10 to 11 weeks.
You had to turn in your key. You have to turn in your key at the end of this.
Oh, no, you keep your
Oh, okay. The locks are, yeah.
Yeah. So like I have,
Oh, you have keys to the city there?
I have my key to the city. It no longer opens anything because the
Yeah.
site's sort of dismantled.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
In
Yeah.
fact, I have a key for every key project I've made.
All right.
This is the key to the city of New York. This is the key to the city of Birmingham. This is a key to a small park in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's a permanent piece of mine. So the
All
key
right.
opens the park.
Hey.
This is the key to a museum in Brazil, where I actually convinced the museum to change the lock to the front door so people could come after hours.
Wow.
And this is another key for
You may
much
have
more-
as many keys to the city as anyone out there.
yes,
To different cities, rather.
without ever having achieved anything heroic.
Good work.
And also that, again, I want to emphasize how the authorship is distributed. And if you distribute the authorship, then that's how you create engagement. There's authorship for each site. There's authorship for each participant. Also, it increases the reach. It also connects things, right? It's like suddenly like the Museum of Geology is connected to a mosque. So you start to understand the city as a series of spaces that are collaborating. Mm-hmm. And this is a good example of how it works. It's like I went to the Geology Museum and they were like, well, one of the most interesting things here is that like 90% of the collection is underground and it's you can't see it. So they open doors and they open drawers. And I said, well, I'm really interested in this idea that you can't touch things in the vitrine. So we talked about it. And then they found this little cabinet underneath the vitrine. And you can see the key to the city opens. And then there's 5 drawers. But then this gives the curators of the museum a chance to do things that they can't normally do. Mm-hmm. So one drawer, there's someone opened a drawer. One drawer had fossils you could touch, which normally you're not allowed to do. Mm-hmm. One drawer had things categorized as beautiful, which is not a very scientific categorization,
Geodes,
but they were able to do.
Minerals, yep.
And then there's a drawer of things that people in the museum make.
Oh, cool.
Which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And again, like the documentation made by other people, sometimes it's better than my documentation. This is a TikTok someone made of going to the museum. And I love that they did not reveal what's in the drawers, right? Like they want to be really careful not to ruin, not to have a spoiler for people. So they show you up to the moment of opening it, and then they cut to something else. It also shows you that these people came because of the project, but then they stayed to look at the museum, a museum that they might not have normally gone to. And I don't want to gloss over, this was a lot of work. Like this museum is in the university, and we tried to make it work with the astronomy department, where there's like an observation place where they have a telescope, and that didn't work. They have a very tall tower, but that didn't work. And so out of many, many conversations and months of work, in the end, we ended up with this one thing. The library was a site that is interesting because it's the only site where I actually created the experience.
Oh.
And what happened is there's 40-something branches of the library system, and 21 of them wanted to participate.
Did you do that in New York also?
Yes, but it was a little bit different.
Okay.
But the library in New York, well, actually, this was informed by the experience in New York.
Yeah.
In New York, I chose one of the libraries, and then the other libraries were like, like we wanted to participate. So this time, half of the library system wanted to participate.
All right.
So it was like, how do we accommodate that?
Yeah.
So we created a little lockbox that goes in the stacks. So in 21 libraries, you have asked, the librarian for directions, and you go down the stacks and you find this box. And when you open it, there's a diary and pens, and you can like fill out one of the pages of the diary. And the prompts were, I am here, I'm from here, I was from here, I will be here, I'm not here, and I'm not from here. Write down a list of something about the spaces that you have access to. And then people just fill it out.
Beautiful.
So it's just making space, If you want people to participate, you got to make the space for them to participate. And that means making an artwork that to some degree is empty. I would say this work has a lot of empty space. There is a meaning. It's a key to the city, it's democratized, it's for everyone, there's many of them, it opens many sites, and then there's like a lot of empty space for each site to create meaning and each participant to create meaning. And we're almost done. And just bear in mind, this is half of the sites. There are 21 sites, and I think I'm about to show you site number 10 in my list for today. This is Raja Monkey, which is a sort of slightly out of the way, but well-regarded locally restaurant. And this is the challenge of the project. You go there, you meet the chef, and the chef's like, well, I don't have anything that's locked. I have an open kitchen with big glass so everyone can see inside. There's not even a lock. Like, I'm not going to give you the lock to the restaurant so people can come in after hours. Like, what can we do? So you just have a chat. And then he talked about how most of the recipes in the restaurant are really inspired by home cooking, specifically by his mother's cooking. But then he has to do all these things so it becomes fine cuisine. So then I was like, well, what about revealing the source? So if you go to this restaurant and you show the key, they bring you, it unlocks
that's great.
another menu. And so you show the key and they bring you this other menu that is his mom's recipes.
That's brilliant.
And then you order from this menu. Of course, chef can't help himself. And his mom's cooking comes out looking like this.
Wow.
And it's delicious. So this was like, so not, the key doesn't always literally open a lock. Sometimes it just kind of unlocks something by just presenting the key. And maybe I'll show you one more site.
Okay.
How are we doing with time?
Yeah, we're doing great. It's
Okay.
1:36.
All right. So this site is complicated. In some ways, it is the most conceptual of the sites. We went to visit this mall, and to be honest, we went to visit because we were looking at another site nearby, and we're like, oh, we should go see this mall, even though like
Nothing special about this one?
nothing special about this mall, and we already have the department store, but let's go take a look anyways. And they're super friendly, and they show us around, and the manager is showing us how the back of the mall and how they can restock all the stores. It's actually fascinating, right? It's like, I wish people could experience what I experienced, which is going to these sites and people showing you all the secret stuff.
Yes.
Right? Like when I went to the cemetery, they're like, do you want to see the crematorium? You know, and then they're like, they literally gave me a tour of like bodies being cremated and how the ashes are put in urns. And I'm like, this is fascinating.
Wow.
Right? But I can't, like, it's impossible, right? It's fascinating, but it's impossible to show that to the public.
Yeah.
Same thing with the mall. They're showing us how the loading docks are on the roof, and then there's secret passageways behind the store. So they're restocking the stores while the stores are open. And you and I are none the wiser that it's happening.
Really?
But they did tell something in passing, that when the mall was built, it was built over several streets. And the streets are still legal streets. So they have to preserve the right of way. So they say at night, all the stores close, they all have their own security, and the mall stays open so people can still use these streets that are now indoor pedestrian streets. But they said, but for practical reasons, we close it at midnight and we don't reopen till the next morning because, you know, it's like, at some point, no one's really walking through. So I said,
Sure.
well, what if we kept the streets open 24/7, right? So what if we returned public space to public space? And they said, we're going to think about it. Which is usually that means no.
Yeah, sure.
Right. It really is like
Just don't want to say it to your face.
right. And when people try to let me down easy, they said they're going to think about it.
Sure.
And then they never call me back.
But they thought about it.
They thought about it and they called back and they're like, we'll do it. And then they did something so you could actually, like, past midnight, go through the mall and basically find yourself inside the mall by yourself.
Wow.
And as an added bonus, I think they even added like a little place where you could make yourself some hot chocolate in the middle of the night.
That's actually a beautiful space.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a classical arcade style. You know what I mean? Where you can, I love it. The high ceilings, the vaulted ceiling, it was beautiful.
Yeah, well, it reminds you that a mall is just a return to the marketplace,
Yep,
right?
yeah.
It's just like our version of the market, you
Yep.
know, with stalls and a street.
Sure.
And people moving about.
Yeah.
So maybe we could have just an open conversation about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a bunch of questions in here. I'm going to try to synthesize them a little bit. But
Sure.
I think one of the things that kind of jumps out to me is, wow, this is complicated. You know, there's Paul Ramirez Jonas at the center of this. How many people does it take to pull this kind of thing off? Sure, we saw the 5 volunteers, but how did you do this?
Well, this is something that with creative time, we sort of like had to invent a way. So it starts with a team of 2, myself and a producer that gets hired specifically for the project.
What's the producer's background, and is this an event production kind of company or what?
Usually producers for this kind of thing, I found the best producers come from theater or film.
Oh, okay.
Right, because they're used to doing things in public space, securing sites, getting permissions, talking to people.
Yeah.
And then it starts to expand. So it started with one producer and myself. We start to work. We do the background work. We figure out how many people we're going to use. Then we added an assistant producer. Then we realized that things would have to be built. So another producer came online just to...
Have you gotten the money yet? Okay.
I got paid in 3 installments.
Okay.
One to get me in,
Yeah.
one in the middle so I wouldn't run away, and one at the end.
Okay. Okay, so we're a team of 5-ish.
Yeah, then we're a team of like 5-ish, and
Yeah.
then you hire a PR firm separately, and then you start to recruit volunteers, and then each site, depending on their resources, like for example, Selfridges was very keen on doing this, and it's good PR for them, so they brought in their own staff to fabricate that booth and all of that. But then we worked for a very small church that was very under-resourced, and we had to help them. We had to make things for them. So it's not one size fits all. You sort of have to be sensitive that you're connecting big institutions with little institutions, and sometimes private people like the Blytons. So we kind of had to adapt to each site and give them the support they needed.
So when you had done, I mean, you've done public art experiential type works leading up to New York and certainly leading up to this. How did previous experience inform this Birmingham thing? Your expectations must have been pretty well established. How did your expectations line up with the results that you saw?
You get some things right and you get some things wrong, right?
Right.
It's like you learn from experience.
Hey, can we talk about what went wrong?
Oh, what went wrong with this one?
Yeah.
I think that in New York, the thousands of people got the key, but hundreds of people participated by going to the sites. So I told each site, you don't have to worry about too many people, right? Because they're trickling in. Even if you get hundreds and hundreds of people, they're going to trickle in slowly. So we weren't prepared for things like 5,000 people showing up on one weekend.
Was the entire thing walkable in New York? Meaning relatively localized, so that somebody could hit multiple spots in a day? Okay.
No, it was actually very challenging because one site was at the very end of Staten Island. Right?
Yeah.
And another site was New
Harlem
York
or
is
something?
huge. So it was
Yeah.
and we really had the one in New York was done with the blessings of the mayor's office, but the mayor's office insisted that it had to be evenly distributed for political reasons among all the boroughs.
Oh gosh, okay.
So it was like a real commitment to spread it through all the boroughs.
I understand.
So it made it really hard to navigate. Time consuming to navigate.
Yes.
What didn't work sometimes is like an expectation of how many people. Guessing how many keys to make is also an
Sure.
art. Like I did a project in Brazil with keys. We ran out of keys in 10 days. We just completely misjudged the level of participation.
Yeah.
In New York, we overshot. We made 24,000 keys, and we gave away 19,000. If you want a key to the city of New York that doesn't work anymore, please email me because I have thousands in storage. With Birmingham, we got it just right. Like we almost ran out of keys. We closed down the distribution site, and then they did like a one-day event in a mall to give away a few more. And apparently there were like lines for blocks for people trying to do this last call to get the key. And they give away literally the last keys that day. Things that don't work is that there are some sites you really, really want and get attached to, and you keep getting these walls of no that are not always logical, and you're trying to convince people to please do it, and it's very hard to. Once someone says no, it's almost impossible to make them change their mind.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the most magical thing. Why do some people say yes? Why do some people say no? Again, I mentioned the fear, and I think like this fear of the public, which is ourselves, right? It's really interesting to me that you're experiencing that with museums. It's like they want more people to come in, but then you propose something that expands some things, and then the same people you're trying to bring in, you start to be scared of them, right? What might they do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right?
It's like, well, why do you assume they'll do something that you yourself would not do, right? So I'm really interested in that. And I'm really interested in how it takes some commitment. You had to go to the train station. You had to bring a friend. You had to come up with a reason why you gave them the key. It's already filtering who's coming into a very trustworthy human being like yourself. And so I always say nothing bad, knock on wood, has ever happened with any of my projects, and I hope it remains that way.
Has anybody taken this concept or asked permission to take the concept and roll with it in their own hometown?
It's funny because when the one in New York happened, it was such a success that I almost became scared. That I was like, oh no, now I'm going to be the artist who...
The key to the city guy?
The key to the city guy, like the cows that show up in every city, and like the cows get painted in different ways and plopped everywhere. And it's like, this, I will spend the next 25 years doing this. How horrible.
Yeah.
But it took 12 years from one city to the next city to want to do it.
Yep.
I think it's very complicated to do this. And I'm still surprised that more people are not doing it. And I know it's expensive, but it doesn't have to be expensive. I think there's ways to do this that would be almost at the grassroots level that would be very cheap, and I'd be interested in doing that.
What about the life, the permanence of its effects beyond the day of, right? So we have a we have a small memorial in a graveyard with some beautiful little mementos. We have a wood storage locker and a bridge with beautiful notes. How does that stuff live on? What does Birmingham? How does Birmingham think about that project now? It's temporal, right? Is it done?
I don't know. I heard back from Fierce, who were the producers of the project, and they said that there's already people saying we should do this every year.
What?
Right? I'm interested in public space and public art, and of course, if you're interested in these things, you're interested in permanence, and permanence is really hard. What's permanent? Steel, stone, glass, right? And that's why it's very hard to make interesting public art, because once you're trying to make it last forever, it really diminishes what you can do. The possibilities become very small. So part of me feels like, well, it should be like our bodies. Our bodies are not forever. Public art should not be forever. I'm happier to make something very complex that only lasts 10 weeks than to end up making something very simple that lasts forever, if that makes any sense.
Do you think we could do this in Ithaca, around Cornell?
We talked about this a few minutes before we started the show, and I think we could, because there is a way to do this in a small town, just like, it's just the willingness of doing it. It doesn't have to be this big fancy thing, you know. You could people could pay for, like, one of the most expensive things is making the keys, but you could just ask people to chip in the $2 that it costs to make the keys.
Sure.
And then it could become almost self-perpetuating in some ways.
Were you able to get resources, human assistance from people? To what degree was the mayor's office willing to put in time or resources in the case of Birmingham and New York? Did they say, turns out we have a public affairs liaison who can help you with it? Did that happen?
Yes and no. In New York, this is what I love about public space. If you make a work for a museum, for a gallery, they were engineered to be neutral. There's no resistance, right? It's made for the artist to do whatever they want. The minute you enter public space, a million problems arise. Yeah. So in New York, I felt like, yes, we have the mayor's support. The mayor went so far as to declaring that the key I had made was now the official key to the city of New York for a month, right? And that he really took it seriously, that he was devolving his power to every citizen. So he no longer was the one who decided. And I thought, well, with this in hand, I'm going to get all the police stations and all the schools and everything to follow right along, because I have like the mayor's office behind me. Oh no, but there's something called, collective bargaining, and like the police officers are not very happy with the mayor's office at this moment, so they are not going to help with anything coming out of there. So in New York, the mayor's participation was great in that it gave it this real official weight. And it weirdly made it impossible for me to get the participation of any agency. In Birmingham, it was slightly the reverse. The fact that it was semi-official made people really trustworthy, but they have really complicated city politics, and dealing with the council was always like we tried to open the council chamber. You would think that would have been the easiest since they were on board, and we could never achieve it.
No.
It's a feature of public space is that often no one knows who has the permission to say that it's okay to do something in it.
Yes.
So you'll find, I have an anecdote.
Go ahead.
So in Birmingham, there used to be public urinals from the Victorian era, and a few of them survived. They're in the street, they're beautiful, they're made of cast iron, and they're like little public bathrooms. We're going to reopen it.
Yeah.
For months, we couldn't figure out who's in charge of them. Right? They're dead smack in public space.
Yeah.
Clearly, they're even being maintained. And we just couldn't, even the people in the mayor's office were like, well, we're not sure. Ask this person. We could never, it was like a mystery. We never found out who's in charge of these public bathrooms from the Victorian era. Public space is endlessly fascinating for me in this way.
With the scale of involvement in any of those, any disastrous legal stuff come out of any of these?
No, I think that the people who were worried about disaster, I really wanted to show where all the garbage goes in Birmingham.
Yeah. And
we just couldn't get it to work. And they were just really concerned with safety and security and what people might do.
Bad optics for the city, potentially. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know what you're stepping on. Well. So, but no disasters have happened. No one's misused it, or again, I always operate from a premise that I trust people. In every public project I've done, and there's some that I've done that are really fiercely in public space with people, and I'm always like, trust people, and if you trust them, they'll trust you back.
Yeah, exactly. And that's very nice to hear. That your hypothesis has been repeatedly, for the most part, validated.
Although I have
As
to
far as how
admit,
people behave.
I feel like
in
an
good faith.
imposter because when I'm in the middle of a project and people ask that question, it's like, what if something goes wrong? I would say, well, nothing ever goes wrong. I
Yeah.
trust people. But I'm always, do I? And then I'm always, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I say that I trust people, but then when people act in a trustworthy fashion, I find myself surprised. So I'm like, why am I surprised if this is what I believe?
We're all a little conflicted.
We're all a little
Let's be
conflicted.
honest.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable sharing operational budgets for something like this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Sandra asks, what would a budget for a project like this be for a mid-sized city, say under $1 million? What's Birmingham? How many people live in Birmingham? Under 5?
It's
I don't even know.
I don't
No
even
idea.
know. I think it's 5 or 6. It's a pretty large city.
Okay, all right. So operational budget, ballpark.
It's the ballpark depends, right? It's like I would say anywhere between $150 to $250,000. It all depends on sponsors. So, for example, in this case, Yale
Yep.
was like, we make keys. We're from Birmingham. Like, don't go get anybody else to make this.
Yeah.
We will make this.
Great.
And they went all out and they did it all for free.
Yeah.
And they even made the box. That wasn't even part of the plan. They're like, oh, we're gonna make a little presentation box for the key.
Oh, they did that thing. Okay.
Yeah, we made
Great.
the booklet, but it was completely their idea that
Yeah.
that it should come in a box. If that had been in our budget, it would have made our budget higher. Depends if people volunteer or you have paid. Like staffing could be really expensive, so that gives you an idea. But I think that if the cost of the key is absorbed and people volunteer in a small town, it could be done for under $100,000.
That's really encouraging to know. So I have my key to the city guide here, right?
Yes.
And the other entities that were involved with the Birmingham 2022 Festival, Commonwealth Games, and the Arts Council of England, the Heritage Funds, pretty big organizations. So if you're a smaller municipality, probably dealing with smaller potatoes.
Yeah, but Creative Time is a relatively small nonprofit. And they did it in New York City. Like, not with peanuts, but it felt like peanuts sometimes.
Hey, we have a couple more minutes for questions, audience. Thank you for chiming in thus far. I want to just make sure we share a couple resources here. We have the Nara Wrestler Galleria.
Yes.
I hope I pronounced that correctly. This is where your work is featured, outside of the Keys to City. What are we sharing here with this URL?
Oh, that is the gallery that represents my work. So I make these public works, but I'm still, parts of me are very traditional artist that makes things that go on the wall and on the floor. And Nara Rossler is a gallery from Brazil that has a gallery in New York, in Sao Paulo, and Rio de Janeiro, and they represent my work. If you go there, you can just see examples of images and sculptures that I make. They all relate to public space, but they're not participatory.
Yeah, they're beautiful. There's a beautiful gallery of Paul's work there. I would imagine that some of these organizations had a really great, I don't know, this is where my mind goes, content marketing opportunity in this kind of thing. I'm thinking about the stadium. I'm thinking about Selfridges, for instance, right? That must have been something. You know, you've got, 6 weeks of content kind of rolling through.
Yeah, and also that many of these, not many, but some of these venues spun out their own media out of it. So I know that...
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so like Yale made a promotional video.
Yeah.
I think that Selfridges made a promotional video. And there was another participant. Oh, and the building that was about to open, Colmar Row.
Yeah.
They also made like their own little 3-minute snippet that they put on social media and all their channels to reach out clients and things like that.
It may be fair to suspect that that was the most exciting public relations media that Yale had to date. I don't know.
They are very
Stayed.
yeah, there is nothing glamorous about Yale.
But that was great, their involvement. That's beautiful to see. I think I am set for audience questions here. I don't have any more. And we're coming up against the end of the hour.
All right. Well,
Anything, let's talk about the arts department at Cornell.
sure.
Some of the work that you do. You know, I kind of neglected to mention in my intro that Paul is chair of the arts department up at Cornell's College of Architecture, Arts, and Planning. And you're relatively new to the position.
1 year.
What's cooking over there?
a lot of things are cooking.
Yeah.
The entire college is under the leadership of Mijin Yoon, our dean, who is also relatively new. I think she's on her 4th year. And really this idea of how can planning, architecture, and art really make a contribution towards the largest problems of our times. And it's hard to figure out how the arts can do that. And I think that projects like this that just create participation and engagement, I think like one of the biggest problems we have in the world right now is apathy, right? And lack of engagement, or people not feeling like they have the agency to do things because systems have become so big. So I think the entire department is trying to think of like, how do we maintain both a foot on our traditions that are making paintings, making sculptures, making prints that are exhibited and last for hundreds of years, and the way an artwork delivers content literally is over hundreds of years, right? We still go and find meaning in things that have been in a museum that were made 300 years ago. And how do we combine that with things that are more topical and also more of the moment? So what's exciting is that we have almost 50% new faculty. And now we have faculty that represent the entire spectrum, from people doing very traditional things to people like me who are doing these temporary things, and everything in between.
Yes.
And then students can come and choose like what kind of artist they want to be, and then find a faculty member that represents that position. So I'm really excited about the future of the art department.
Perfect. And for our viewers, I encourage you to check out the AAP website at Cornell to check out some of the beautiful work that faculty are doing there. I want to thank you all for your participation, your questions here. Paul Ramirez, Jonas, absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. Thanks everybody for viewing. We will see you at the next keynote. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay tuned. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.